Welcome to the April 16th, 2018 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery, Commissioner Roth, Commissioner Peterson,
Here.
Commissioner Willoughby,
Here.
Commissioner Beanhoff,
Here.
Commissioner Busby is here, Commissioner Wise,
Here.
Commissioner Braley,
Here.
Commissioner Les Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Mudgett,
Here.
Commissioner John Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Consent agenda items 1 through 3 are listed under the consent items agenda unless there is a motion or unless there is a request to remove. Unless there is a request to remove one of these items from the consent agenda, the item will be approved in one motion. Is there a request to remove any items from the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Commissioner Braley? Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Wise?
Second.
Motion is second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Next item is new business. And we're continuing our discussion regarding the provisions to building design policies regarding EPAs.
Word by word of what you guys had asked for. Hopefully that's the case, and if it is, then we would just ask that you go ahead and have a motion, a second, and a vote to adopt these guidelines. If there are changes that still need to be made, we would need to iron those out tonight. I think I covered every item that you guys had talked about.
Doug, a question for you.
Yes.
After we approve these, does the city council have to approve them as well?
No, these are your amenity and design guidelines.
Design guidelines.
You
stay
are the
within us.
aesthetic board for the city.
Very fine. Does any of the commission have a question for staff on this item? Commissioner John Smith?
Well, since I missed the last meeting, I would ask, are there any examples of these that have these been installed anywhere?
Yeah, there's examples all over town from our, not over this town, but over the county. A previous meeting in 2017, we actually polled a lot of the other cities, and they are allowing the EPAS material. As far as the brick material and the stone material, there are limited applications on that, and what we had talked about was that we haven't been approached to do that sort of application. But if an application like that does come in, that we would probably have a test case, maybe allow it on a building or two and then have a moratorium for a certain period of time before we would have any more of those type of applications. But to answer your question, yes, these are industry standards. They have been used in the region and nationally. I don't know if you were at the 2017 presentation, but we had material samples of the brick and stone, and they appear to be durable and pretty cutting edge in terms of technology.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beanhoff?
A question for staff, and I know it's been quite some time, but I didn't know if you had any recollection of, in prior cases in other areas, how long from the time the material was installed until they started to see or notice deterioration?
Well, probably what you're referencing is the Old West, if you will. The building code really didn't address in any detail the installation of EPAS materials. The industry saw that they were losing market share, in my opinion, and so they policed themselves. And it is now part of the International Building Code and actually is part of an industry testing standard. What you see in front of you is a system that only is drainable. We are not even contemplating allowing a non-drainable system, which is allowed by code. So this is about the highest end of what we would see. In terms of failure, those old cases, it varied. It really did. It depended on that installation.
Sure.
The same probably could be said with cemented stucco in some cases. That it's truly how you install it, the code that applies to it, and making sure that we follow that code is our best policer of making sure things like this, like bad examples, don't happen in the future. I guess.
Thanks, Doug. That's very helpful. And knowing that the industry has standards and testing and
Yes.
international building codes as part of that gives me a little bit more comfort in that as well. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff from the commission? Commissioner Wise?
Just a quick comment that in this, it's good that you reference the adopted IBC standard. That way we don't have to update this every time they do that. So that is appreciated.
Any other questions or comments from the commission towards the staff? If not, is there a motion on this item? Commissioner Wise?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the guidelines as presented by staff.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Mudgett?
I'll second.
The motion is second to adopt the guidelines as presented by staff on EFS. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Now we're into, does the commission have anything for staff, or the staff have anything for the commission? Paul? Thank you. I believe there's 3 young people here, and this spring is usually the time of year we get the high school classes in here for their civics deal. Is that correct? Which school? Shawnee Mission North. Well, welcome. We hope you've enjoyed this whole thing. You picked the right meeting. We're just about done. Anything else? Commissioner Peterson? Oh, man.
Well, there's certain guidelines that the state has that fall within that home care plus to be cited that. So as long as they're within license and within those guidelines.
And that would be changeable by the state, by their statute at any time. So we're just essentially following the state guidelines. Man, they're really making me sweat it out tonight. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Les Smith.
after dutiful consideration and respect for the 11 members of the commission, which I think might be a first, I move we adjourn.
Ooh, is there a second on this matter? Commissioner John Smith.
I would second the motion if we adjourn.
The motion is second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you all. Thank you for being here too.